Day is breaking on the English coast near the port of Dover. Coming from the sea, a strange hum is heard. When suddenly, straight out of a cloud of mist, a flying machine appears on the horizon. Like a large insect tossed about by gusts of wind, the machine seems to be looking for its way. It flies along the high limestone cliffs in search of an opening in the landscape to be able to land. After a few minutes of hesitation, the machine dives in the direction of a meadow. The roaring finally stops. The machine hovers for 100 more feet, then crashes gently in the tall grass. It is a little after 4:30 a.m. It is July 25, 1909. Louis Blériot has just achieved an unimaginable feat. The French aviator was the very first man to cross the channel on board a heavier-than-air aircraft. More than a century later, enthusiasts decided to pool their experience and knowledge in aeronautics by reconstructing piece by piece the mythical Blériot XI. By respecting as closely as possible the techniques of the time, they hope to understand how Louis Blériot was able to take such a risk, how he was able to commit his fortune, his reputation, and even his life to propel aviation into its modern era. In an incredible Eiffel hangar, Didier Chable watches over an extraordinary collection. Latécoère 28, Farman 40, Messerschmitt or DC-3. Since his retirement, this former Air Force Test Center flight instructor has been restoring old planes with a handful of enthusiasts.
My passion for the airplane collection did not come right away. I understood the possibility existed even without great financial resources. It took determination, hard work, and a whole team joined me, plus all the volunteer members, everyone passionate about aviation. With them, we were able to recover and restore planes that still fly, and we put together this collection.
These devices mark the history of aviation in the 20th century, but one model was missing from the collection. For Didier Chable, embarking on the Blériot XI project is not just a fad, it is a journey through time, a return to the origins of aviation, to the era of the pioneers when everything was yet to be invented. The team will retrace the key stages in the development of this exceptional aircraft, but without any plan, the task is very complicated. Erased by the accidents of history, the drawings of Blériot XI were recreated by the passion of these men. Thanks to these plans, they will conduct a historical and technical investigation and together try to understand the conditions of Louis Blériot's exploit. Once made, the replica of the Blériot XI, the channel crossing model, will naturally find its place at the center of Moulin's large collection.
Of course, the Blériot XI. Every collector dreams of working on a Blériot and possibly flying it. For collectors, it's a myth.
Didier Chable has surrounded himself with the best specialists. They are carpenters, mechanics, or engineers. They all hope to be as faithful as possible to Blériot's spirit.
Remaking an aircraft identically today is possible, but extremely complicated because we don't always have all the plans and know-how has been lost. It's very interesting to show the values of the time, to show what is daring, what is courage, commitment, what it is to develop the techniques.
At the head of the Flying Club of France, Catherine Monnery has, through her career, been carried by the history of the pioneers. The two-time world aerobatic champion preserves the memory of a true epic today. An adventure over 100 years old, both human and technical. A page of history written by men and women for whom danger is only a detail. On board her aerobatic plane, Catherine Monnery is able to string together figures at the edge of a stall. She is heir to the spirit of adventure and innovation that reigns at the beginning of the 20th century.
The history of aeronautics is fascinating because it is undoubtedly the first which develops at such a speed. The first big event is perhaps Louis Blériot crossing the Channel. Something is really happening. Who'd have thought that 60 years later, the Concorde would make its first flight? And soon after that, we walk on the moon. Blériot certainly couldn't have imagined it. It's an incredibly rich period, perhaps the richest period in France's history of technical advances. It's extraordinary. Everything started in France.
During the Belle Époque, this period of enthusiasm and constant technical innovation, the automobile was just beginning to demonstrate its superiority over horses. Gasoline engines are struggling to prevail against steam engines. In the sky, dirigibles still dominate. But the manifesto of Nadar, a dirigible enthusiast, states that to fight against air, you have to be heavier than air. It was on the basis of this idea that the pioneers of a nascent aviation launched their efforts. While Clément Ader takes off from the ground in what he will call a plane, Louis Blériot innovates in a completely different field.
For the blind cars immobilized by the night, I thought of giving them means to see and to navigate in the darkness. In the search, I was happy. I created the headlight. The word and the object made me a fortune.
Fairly quickly, Blériot created his company of headlights and automotive accessories. It's a great success. The engineer dabbles in everything, throws himself into his new passion when he discovers the first flying machines, exhibited during the Universal Exhibition of 1900.
How did I get into aviation? How did the desire overtake me to give myself body and soul to this miraculous thing, a human in flight? It is my whole life that should be examined.
A few years later, his dream of flying finally becomes accessible. On July 25, 1909, at 4:40 a.m., on board his new machine, Louis Blériot sets out to cross the Channel from the dunes of Sangatte. It's a 23-mile flight that no one has ever done. Blériot is in bad shape. During recent tests, an engine oil leak burned his leg. He moves with crutches. Morning spectators scrutinize the gaze of a man who has nothing more to lose.
Blériot has courage. He's injured, his leg hurts. He's been tested. He manages to leave in this state. He is not in good shape. He can't swim, he's tired, and he's going anyway. When we tell him to get up, he's tired. He barely has the courage to go on. With the excitement, he goes ahead. And he does something extremely difficult. And that shows that we are able to surpass ourselves, that we are able to go further. And that is interesting because it is what everyone must have in themselves. It is the opportunity to show it, to develop it.
A little emotion takes hold of me when I take my place in the device. I say to myself, what will happen to me? Would I even get to Dover? A quick, fleeting reflection which fortunately does not last.
While Blériot's mechanics pull the plane to the edge of the field, an escort ship, the Escopette, is already at sea to follow his journey. In the event of a breakdown, it will be the only hope for Blériot to make it out alive.
Everything is ready. Faithful to the rules, I wait for the sunrise. Leblanc soon indicates to me that the sun is up by means of a flag that he waves on the dune. It's my signal.
The propeller is actuated. The engine starts. The Blériot XI dashes towards the sea. The French aviator rises slowly, clinging to his controls. He wonders if his plane will hold up. In Moulins, the reconstruction of the mythical plane continues.
The Blériot XI, it's the very beginning of aeronautics. In a single plane, so many techniques were brought together concerning the engine, the plane's structure, aerodynamic formulas. We discovered a lot of things with that plane.
Didier Schaap called on Patrick Siegwald, an exceptional carpenter capable of reproducing many wood pieces that make up the structure of this revolutionary aircraft. In his workshop, he has already worked on parts of the Blériot XI, but also on other planes of the same period with equivalent characteristics.
From the start, we used wood and fabric because that's what we had. In the beginning, everything needed to be created. When the first aeronautical engineers started making prototypes, they took what they had. When they needed an engine or landing gear, there were no manufacturers. It was necessary to create everything, so we took what we had. This is why on the planes of this time, 1910 to 1920, there are many different varieties of wood, depending on the use. If it's a part that requires a little effort, it's ash. If it's a part that requires compression, it's beech. Back then, people knew how to use the different woods to good effect all over the plane. We were focused on more classic metallic planes. A few in canvas, a few gliders, with a bit of wood and canvas, of course, but we'd never made a plane to fly with a wooden structure, with piano strings to hold it together and stiffen the structure. So all that, we had to learn. The Blériot XI really has specific techniques that we have discovered.
He was not the only one. Driven by the boundless enthusiasm of the Golden Age, engineers, or sometimes simple thrill seekers, test their inventions with varying degrees of success. At the start of the 20th century, even the wildest dreams seemed possible. Like this tailor who tests his parachute suit from the first level of the Eiffel Tower.
There is a craze, which I find extraordinary at that time, with everything that is happening, because it is our ancient dream to succeed in rising into the sky.
For his part, Blériot multiplies his prototypes. 10 aircraft models will follow one another in the space of 9 years before culminating in the Blériot XI. In 1905, Blériot joined forces with another aviation pioneer, Gabriel Voisin. Together, they experimented with a biplane glider on the Seine. Pulled by a motorboat, the aircraft took off for 150 meters. Then crashed a few minutes later.
The big argument between them is, do we make a biplane? Do we make a monoplane? The two are discussed. There will be a biplane. The biplane has more lift, but it also has more drag. With a biplane, practically at 19 miles per hour, you will be able to get it in the air, whereas the monoplane needs more power, because you have less load-bearing surface. So they don't agree on that, and Blériot will nevertheless continue on his way and separate, saying, listen, if we can't get along, I'm going.
Blériot continued to fail, but he also filed for patents and continued his tests because he was looking for the best flight configuration. In 1907, he abandoned biplanes and began to achieve success with his monoplanes, which flew only a few minutes. The Canard, the Libellule, the Blériot XI. We can no longer count all the prototypes aboard which Blériot takes all the risks. But with the Blériot XI, we are very far from his first trial and error. He really starts to pilot.
In addition to being the inventor and the constructor and the financier, he is also the pilot. He does the job of test pilot. He does his tests himself.
Paris, 1907. Louis Blériot sets the pace for a new attempt aboard his model number 6, the Libellule.
I had to attempt to fly it, and I pulled on the controls. The device made a terrible leap. Then, yes, I was afraid.
Louis Blériot is nicknamed the Falling Man. People are almost mocking him, saying he broke his machine again. You have to put up with that as much as the fear. It is extremely unpleasant. It is ultimately a form of contempt. Go play with your little paper plane. However, they are making some of the greatest discoveries in human history.
I must continue because I can no longer do otherwise. I have to continue because, like the player, I have to catch up. I must continue because it is sure, because my calculations are correct. The solution is exact, because I have to fly. I must continue.
The Blériot XI is often presented as the first modern airplane. Even though materials have greatly evolved since its conception, its silhouette continues to fascinate by its elegance and the purity of its lines.
They think about making something very light because they don't have super powerful engines. So if they want something strong and light, they have no choice. They need a working structure, like Eiffel created for his tower. The working structure derives all of its rigidity from triangulation. The principle of a working structure is to triangulate all efforts. There we can clearly see on the braces each force is transmitted to the next brace, and therefore by triangulation we have a solid structure.
Many people rightly consider the Blériot XI to be the first modern aircraft. Indeed, it is an airplane that looks like all airplanes today. The engine is in the front, a monoplane wing, you can maneuver it. The fuselage is quite long. At the rear, it is deep. It is a mobile plane with a fin. The Blériot is the right balance that will allow success. No mystery about it.
On July 25, 1909, over the English Channel, Louis Blériot has just taken off, but the passing time seems endless to him.
Above the earth and the houses and the woods, the roads appear and disappear as if in a dream. Above the water, it seems the same wave always presents itself to my view.
Despite the robustness of its engine and the lightness of the aircraft's structure, Blériot has to deal with an enemy that is far more unpredictable: the weather. Louis Blériot flies barely 320 feet above the sea. For the moment, he only feels the freshness of a morning breeze.
Even now, when we're flying above water, we don't really like it. When I'm flying above water, I don't really like to cross. And each time I tell myself, it doesn't matter. The plane doesn't know, it doesn't matter. Don't tell it. Besides, it can't swim. Blériot didn't know a lot of things. Would there be turbulence above the water? Will the plane be sucked in by I don't know what? And in fact, he realizes it's calm. In reality, it's calm because the weather is nice.
Blériot has been flying over the English Channel for 10 minutes now. He is alone above the waves and can no longer afford to doubt neither his calculations nor his engine.
I'm happy with my plane. Its stability is perfect. And the engine, what a marvel. Ah, my brave Anzani, it doesn't even flinch.
In their hangar in Moulins-Villaroche, the enthusiasts ask themselves the same questions as at the time. Will their own Anzani engine, an original that left the factory more than 110 years ago, hold up? With its 25 horsepower, it does not even have the power of a moped today. To imagine that it will take up the Blériot XI's 550 pounds and the weight of the pilot is wishful thinking. First, it must be in perfect overall condition. The enthusiasts will therefore take the engine out of the fuselage, dismantle it piece by piece, and carefully check each of its cogs.
There. Here's the baby. For his attempt to cross the channel, Blériot chose this Anzani engine because at the time, it was the only engine sufficiently reliable to last the time of the channel crossing. Alessandro Anzani, he was a colorful Italian immigrant who had learned mechanics at Boucher, which made engines for stayers, bicycle racers on wooden tracks.
At the start of the 20th century, it was at the Parc des Princes in Paris that these motorcycle riders set endurance records. They literally suck the bikes in their wake, sometimes for more than an hour.
The Anzani engine was a simple engine in design. Alessandro Anzani, who designed it, chose the right metals, the right alloys, and he mastered the mechanics very well. He himself claimed, "I sleep with the mechanics." And when Louis Blériot went to see Anzani, he was almost ruined. All the tests he had done had cost him a fortune. When he went to see him, they looked and the engine wouldn't fit into the fuselage. So Anzani remade an engine block, not at 60 degrees, but at 57 degrees, so that the engine fits into the fuselage.
After weeks of work, it's another test day for the Anzani engine. This time, it's a miracle. It runs at full speed, projecting large drops of oil onto the pilot's glasses, just like at the time.
We wanted to confirm the number of rotations. The motor speed is measured with a strobe. This is why we added a disc with a white stripe here to measure the engine's number of revolutions. So we actually had between 1,300 and 1,400 turns. So it's really very satisfying. I go calmly, without any emotion, without any real impression. It seems to me that I am in a balloon. The absence of any wind allows me to make no rudder adjustments. If I could block the commands, I could put both my hands in my pockets. A man like Blériot, he was discovering everything. We did not know what the term piloting was. It didn't exist at the time. He flew, he used his controls so he could stay up in the air. It was, after all, little by little. We said touching the controls, maneuvering the plane, that's piloting. There were pilot's licenses afterwards, issued by the Aero Club de France. I even believe that Blériot received the first pilot's license.
Louis Blériot put his knowledge, his genius, and his temerity at the service of his machines. By multiplying the experiments, the man invented a system of controls, at the same time simple and effective. He is, in a way, the father of air piloting. In Melun, Didier Schaub's team is always looking for new information, so that their replica is as faithful as possible to the Blériot XI channel crossing model. Nowadays, as Blériot predicted, flying has become commonplace, crossing the channel too. But in 1909, the world is in shock. The Daily Mail headline reads, "England is no longer an island." Since then, the British passion for aviation has never wavered. Here in England, a meeting of old planes is organized almost every week. The Shuttleworth collection is one of the most prestigious.
Designed by Tommy Saltwood, it was Spitfire. First of all, it was the engine ring was flying in displacing, which was the Spitfire. What was the equivalent in the radiator? It was quite a high level, so you fly around.
But Didier Schaub and Alain Thomas did not come to England just to admire old planes on display. They crossed the channel to better understand the techniques of piloting of an exceptional aircraft, the oldest of the whole collection. This aircraft, unique in the world, patiently awaits its turn in a special hangar reserved for pre-First World War airplanes. And it is no coincidence that the oldest aircraft in this collection, the most eagerly awaited by the public, the last to take off at the end of the day, is a monoplane with a surprisingly modern silhouette, a Blériot XI.
Blériot is, I would say, one of the most known aviators in Britain. Obviously the first person to cross the English Channel, or La Manche as you would say. Yeah, so very well known as an aviator. This is the oldest airworthy aircraft in the world, 1909 Blériot XI, and it was built for a flying club in Hendon in Britain, built in France, exported to Britain, and it was flown for a number of years before it became derelict, and then Richard Shuttleworth, who started this collection, bought it and restored it to flying condition in 1934-35, I think.
Indeed, that's a Blériot. It's the oldest plane in the world that still flies. It's the grandfather. It has the serial number 14. Its original plate. It is indeed a Blériot XI channel crossing model.
Exceptionally, Didier Schaab takes command of the legendary airplane. For only a few moments, he finds himself in Blériot's shoes. The pilot is always fascinated by the exceptional flying controls designed for this machine.
When we push the steering wheel to one side, we act on the warping of the wing. That is to say, the twist of the wing, which will allow us to obtain the inclination of the plane. When we push the stick to the right wing will rise, and the left will lower. Now I'm going to push the stick in the other direction, to the left, so the right wing goes down and the left wing rises up. This allows us to obtain a certain inclination. But despite everything, we realized after years of aviation experience that it is indeed inefficient. This is why afterwards wings were made rigid and fixed, and control surfaces were added at the end of the wings, at the rear, which we call ailerons.
Blériot invented an extraordinary system with his bell. It can be piloted relatively instinctively. If we tilt the wheel, which has the same role as a handle, a little to the left, I turn to the left. If I push, I go down. It's logical. If I pull, I go up, and I hold my direction, I hold it with my feet. All planes still work like this. My plane, an aerobatic plane with simple controls, is a robust plane, much stronger, but it's the same thing.
The aerobatic planes of today, powerfully robust with their large ailerons, respond in a fraction of a second to the pilot's commands. Impossible to execute such figures with a Blériot XI.
Piloting a Blériot XI is still a bit special because you have only 25 horsepower with a plane that weighs 660 pounds, so we have no power reserve at all. So you have to take off gently, let it go up, not pull on the handle suddenly or turn suddenly, and then try to come back and turn in the other direction. It won't work.
In flight over the English Channel for 20 minutes, Blériot abandoned his escort, the Escopette, far behind him. He knows that if he crashes in the open sea, he has no chance of surviving.
For about 10 minutes, I remained alone, isolated, lost in the middle of the intense sea, seeing no point on the horizon, not perceiving any boat. This calm, disturbed only by the roar of the engine, was a dangerous charm of which I was fully aware. Also, I had my eyes riveted on the oil dispenser and on the level of fuel consumption.
For gasoline, the Blériot XI carries exactly 5 gallons in its modest tank. Enough to cover about 25 miles, depending on the wind. Barely more than the distance between Calais and Dover, 21 miles as the crow flies.
I like the way Blériot puts it. When he leaves, it's stressful, and then all of a sudden, it's all fine. He can't see anything. In addition, it is surely a little foggy. He's between heaven and earth. All is calm, all is smooth, all is good.
I now think only of my plane, the engine, the propeller. Everything is in motion, everything vibrates.
And then all of a sudden, boom, all the counters go into red because the engine misfired. I think his blood pressure went up 10 points. Then everything calms down. It becomes calm again, and the event is over.
The wind and the mist take me. I have to fight with my hands, with my eyes.
In Melun, a delicate operation is underway. To come to the aid of the enthusiasts, a specialist was called in to assist. Pascal Conchon has already covered hundreds of planes, some very modern and some much older. They will, like at the time, cover the fuselage and wings with a protective fabric. It's quite an art.
Many people don't know that an old airplane, or even a modern plane, that are still manufactured in France in series, these planes are made of small pieces of wood glued with canvas on them. It's still very vague for people, and it's quite surprising, even scary for some. These methods have been lost in time. And now there are very few people who are able to do it right, or at least with the right methods or the right gestures.
Once the canvas is stretched, its borders are glued directly to the wood, exactly as Blériot and his team did 110 years ago.
We wanted to stick as close as possible to the techniques of the period. We used the same types of wood. We remade the templates that no longer existed. The only thing that is a little different is the glue. But we still used a bakelite glue, which has been around for over 100 years. So we are essentially in the same procedure and using some of the same materials. Then the fabric, we knew it was cotton, so we had cotton made on demand with the same quality of resistance. We're going to use cellulose sealants and glues exactly as they used at the time. And we're going to put on wooden rods, half-rounded pine, exactly as was done then, with identical small brass points. So we are really close to the methodology and materials used more than 100 years ago.
A wing was born before our eyes, a wing whose unique profile allowed Louis Blériot to stay in flight until the English coast. The flying qualities of the Blériot XI continue to interest science historians today. But in 1909, no one had studied aerodynamics. No one? Not quite. An exceptional engineer, a graduate of the École Centrale like Louis Blériot, had been interested in these questions for several years. Gustave Eiffel. It's not well known, but the Iron Giant dedicated the end of his life to aerodynamics, and he was one of the pioneers. At the beginning of 1909, Blériot had designed two other prototypes, the Blériot IX and the Blériot X. Neither one got off the ground. How could Blériot overcome these failures in a few months to create his masterpiece, the Blériot XI? To try to answer this question, Alain Thomas made a model of the wing of Blériot XI. He would like to have it tested at the Eiffel Aerodynamic Laboratory, still in operation today in Paris.
This is the second wind tunnel built by Gustave Eiffel. The first one in 1909 at the Champ de Mars, and the second one here, which is the improved version, built in 1912 and which has been running continuously since then. The year this building was built. Yes, it was installed at the same time. I think this is the real first modern wind tunnel. First, because it goes at speeds much higher than all the wind tunnels at the time. 62 miles per hour, which is extremely fast. The fastest at the time went barely 31 miles an hour. Above all, he invented all the measuring equipment that made it possible to measure the effects of the wind on airplanes. The two phenomena that interested people who made airplanes: lift, vertical forces, which allow the aircraft to maintain itself in the air, and resistance to advancement. And what is the diameter? The fan is 13 feet in diameter. We have a perception that is quite different because this diffuser that distorts our view. It's quite large. It's a big installation. Impressive, yes. The fan weighs 7 tons, 13 feet in diameter. I think we'll put it like that, but we'll also put it horizontally in its true position to see the difference in flow, and then try to understand the lift effect on the wing.
In a wind tunnel, the air is sucked in a regular and constant way to offer a stable airflow, allowing a large series of very precise measurements. With the beginnings of aeronautics, the study of the path of airflows along the wind profiles will finally become essential. The successful curve of the model shows the airflow speed above the wing. The difference in flow speed between the top and bottom of the wing creates the lift. The Blériot XI, like all other fixed-wing planes, is therefore well drawn upwards to take off.
It's in the wind tunnels that we discovered the phenomena of lift, this vertical force which allows the airplane to stay in the air. It's related to the surface of the wing. It's related to its shape, how the plane can fly. The first aircraft manufacturers believed that the wings should be made flat underneath so that they could lean on the air and that only one engine could move the plane. It's really the experimental work in the wind tunnel which made it possible to understand the primordial role of the wing and to make it evolve to give it its best characteristics for airplanes.
The Blériot monoplane flies normally in the most favorable conditions, corresponding to the minimum tractive effort and the minimum useful force. These are the words of Gustave Eiffel about the profile of the Blériot XI in a book published in 1910. It is therefore thanks to the progress of aerodynamics and to the work of the Iron Giant that Louis Blériot was able to attempt his incredible crossing. Over the channel, after 30 minutes of flight, Louis Blériot finally comes out of the fog. He finally sees the English coast.
There was a moment when he lost sight of the ship. He found himself alone between the sky and the water. There was nothing behind, nothing in front. And that's where he drifted towards the North Sea. And after a while, he said to himself, "Something's wrong." During all this, there was nothing that stuck in his calculations. So it was then that he realized he had drifted. And I do not see Dover yet. Ah, the devil, where am I? After a while, he sees boats to his left. And then suddenly, the coast emerges.
But he finds himself blocked by the cliffs, too high to get over for the low power of its engine. His gas tank is almost empty, but the French aviator still wants to believe.
I follow the cliff from north to south, but the wind against which I am now struggling is picking up again.
Blériot never had the opportunity to establish his arrival spot in England, so he is looking for a suitable place to land.
He can't climb as high as the highest cliffs. It's quite nerve-wracking because he doesn't know how long the engine will last. Maybe he has 50 minutes, but he can't stay 2 hours wondering where he's going to land.
A crevice in the coast appears to my right. A little before the Château de Douvres. I go into it. I rush there.
He says to himself that I have to go there. He will get in there and then have to find a place. He doesn't need much, but he still needs 650 feet of flat land where he can land the plane.
The story goes that he is greeted by a French flag waved by the special envoy of the newspaper Le Matin, by a certain Charles Fontaine.
Now it's time to land. But the wind is violent, and as soon as I approach the ground, a whirlpool lifts me.
He is exhausted, I think, from stress, almost out of energy. He is up at 65 feet, which is extremely high. He reduces everything and he thinks, I've already broken other planes, it's over now.
The fight did not last long, however, because I could not stay in the air for long. And now, I give it a try. Here I go.
One piece of the propeller and some landing gear broke, but that no longer has any importance for Louis Blériot. It is 4:42 a.m., and he has just crossed the channel. Instantly, he is propelled to the rank of national hero. The French aviator has won his bet, and he will become the father of modern aviation. When he returned to France, to Paris, a crowd of 100,000 people welcomed him, a sight never seen before. Orders for the Blériot XI rained down. 200 aircraft are built as a result of his exploit. This is the very beginning of the aviation industry. In October 1909, at the Grand Palais, the first air locomotion fair was held. But this time, it was not the huge dirigible airships and balloons that attract visitors, but a much less impressive machine, apparently more fragile, less powerful. which had yet achieved a feat of international importance. More than 100 years after this first air locomotion show, the Paris Air Show is still the largest gathering of aircraft in the world. All the manufacturers are represented, in particular Airbus, a direct descendant of Blériot Aeronautics. For the Moulin enthusiasts, exhibiting their Blériot XI here represents the culmination of more than 2 years of work. The wings of this strange skeletal bird are put back in place. For the curious who stop in front of the stand, all that remains is to honor the memory of the father of modern aeronautics, Louis Blériot.
Louis Blériot is perhaps the first big event in aviation. Then Lindbergh's Atlantic crossing, the Gagarin spaceflight, and the first step on the moon. I think those are the biggest events in aviation, those that were unimaginable.
Exceeding the speed of sound, piloting a robot, flying entirely on electric power. How many unimaginable feats have been accomplished since the days of the pioneers? The Moulin collection, which aims to retrace all this evolution, is finally complete. The Blériot XI has found its place. Maybe one day, it will take off.
How did I become an aviator? Simply to arrive at a happy time in our human history, which from the legend of Icarus to the plain of Ader dreamt a poetic winged dream. Our inventive imagination is only the reflection of this 1,000-year-old dream. We are in the process of realizing it, but it is they, the vanquished of the legend, the hallucinators, the chimerical and ridiculed dreamers. They are the true inventors.